My name's Beth Devine. I'm from the Wappingers Historical Society, and we're here at Mizzier Homestead today talking to Chris Contelmo, who is a lifelong resident of the village and a longtime member of the Historical Society. So, Chris, I know that you are a fountain of information about growing up in the village, and we really want to hear your stories. So I'm just going to start by asking you, tell us a little bit about growing up, where you did, what you did for fun, and we'll start there.
Okay, all right. Well, first of all, my mother was even born in Wappingers Falls, so all the families of her friends had children the same ages as we were, so we just hung out, and every street had their little street gang, and we played outdoors all day, not like the kids today. And we had formed little ball teams of our own. We had no little league, so we had our own little ball teams. And we played softball down on the field where Valero gas station is, where the deli is next to that on South Avenue. My grandfather owned all the property on South Avenue, from that end of South Avenue down to the following corner on Maple Street, on both sides of the street, except for the garlic estate. So we had the freedom to play in that field and do everything we wanted to do. So we formed teams and we played baseball. And there was a little store on the corner where there's the corner of Franklandale and South Avenue. There's a house, a large house. The little grassy area right on the corner had a little grocery store. And it was Louise's Market, belonged to the Pigliacampi family. And well, in Italian you'd say Pigliacampi. But anyway, we shopped there, we went there for penny candy, we went there for ice cream, we went there for soda after we played baseball, or not baseball, softball, and all the people had a little account there, and Louise would keep it in a little book, and you paid her on payday, because that's the way it was. The people who lived on Franklandale Avenue was known as Irontown, and they all were very hardworking people and very honest, and Louise trusted them.
Were they part of the bleachery, the Irontown?
That's the bleach. Irontown is company houses that were built by the bleachery and rented to the workers. I think originally they rented for $10 a month, in the 20s. And then in the late 20s, or mid-20s, I think, the bleachery sold them. And they could buy half of the house, I think, for $2,500.
Mm-hmm.
Or both families for about $5,000. This is all just things I'm pulling out of my head, but I'm thinking that's about right. And when they were selling them one by one, a lot of people, weren't prepared to pay for them. And my grandfather was such an entrepreneur, they offered him to buy the whole street for $15,000. And he said, no, I have too much property, I don't want it. He didn't buy it. Because he had the bar on the corner. Originally on the corner of Franklandale Avenue and South Avenue, that was, there's a bar there now. I think it's called AJ's or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that bar there, my grandfather had that first. And when he first bought that, it was a big house, and then they added on the bar section. And he and the family lived in the big house attached to that. My grandmother ran a boarding house in the house. And my grandfather, so first she had the grocery store in there, because she just thought that was better for her to do. And it was prohibition. So he still managed to get the men drinking, because down Franklandale Avenue, where Tom Marino's auto body shop is now, there's a smaller building attached to that, and that was a speakeasy. So my grandfather was still having a bar, but it was in his little private area. So when Prohibition ended, they closed my grandmother's grocery store, and it became the bar. And the speakeasy section became a pool hall for a little while.
More money than a grocery store.
Oh yeah, and more social life for him. That was important, right? But the bars in the village, I'm going to skip to that just now, because that was part of the social life in the village. Because every bar had a softball team, every bar had a shuffleboard team, every bar had a bowling team. So that was the social life in the village, and it just, so everybody knew everybody and kept the stats of everybody, and it was a big thing, you know. And that
Friendly
was,
competition.
yeah, it was a wonderful thing. And then we get our shirts made, and you know,
Mhm.
and even today some towns do that. They have the barge teams and so forth. But in Wappingers there were many of them, and the firehouses had their teams too, because we had the two firehouses. They had the teams and they sponsored teams too, and that was a social life for the grown-ups.
That's the west side and the east side. There's
Oh,
a
yeah.
big difference, right? There are
Oh, yeah.
those who live on the east side and those who live on the west side of the
Right.
bridge.
Right.
And I don't know, nary the twain shall meet at
Well,
certain
there was a
times.
great competition. I don't think there was ever a great competition, but we socially, we stayed on this side.
Yeah.
And in fact, a few kids from this side went up to St. Mary's School, but most of us stayed down here and went to public school, because it was a long walk in the winter to go up there to St. Mary's, you know. But
So everybody walked to school.
oh yeah, no, not after 1940. We'll go in 41. We'll get into that after.
Okay, okay.
But for now, just to discuss about socializing, you know. So, I mean, and scouting was very, very big in the village. There was Cub Scouts and Girl Scouts, starting with brownies going up. My mother was a den mother, and for the boys, for the Cubs, and, you know, a scout leader for the brownies, and so they always met in our house. It was so nice. And we socialized with everybody. I wrote a piece for Southern Dutchess News when they sold the Methodist Church, and it was just a letter to the editor. But what I said in that letter was, these were all my friends and neighbors, and I didn't hesitate to go to that church, to go to all their functions, you know. Even back then, if you were Catholic, you didn't participate, but my scouts met there, we put on shows there, we went to all their functions, they had dinners, and it was a wonderful, active church, you know. And we didn't take part in too many of the social activities up at St. Mary's, because again, it was the distance involved, yeah. So most of my friends and neighbors went to all the churches on this side of the bridge, so I participated in all the activities they sponsored too, you know.
Didn't Zion have a stage where they put on productions?
Well, we would practice in our own area, and then when the night of the big production, we'd go to the Zion Church and put on our productions, yes. Yeah, Miss Gurney, who was a guidance counselor at the high school, but at that time she was at the old high school, and her sister was our Girl Scout leader. And they dug out all their old gowns from when they went to weddings and everything. We all wore the gowns. It was a wonderful time. Yeah.
Now, where is the old high school?
The old high school, we should talk about that. The old high school, I don't recall the year it was built. I should have looked that up. But prior to the building of that high school, people in Wappingers Falls went to 8th grade. And if they wanted to go to high school, they had to take the bus or the trolley, with a trolley mostly at that time. The trolley ran until probably, I don't recall that date either, I have it down somewhere. But up until, you know, the year that this high school opened, everybody who had a high school education in the village, it was not a lot of people who did, because they had to go to either Poughkeepsie or Beacon. And most went to Poughkeepsie because the transportation was more available to Poughkeepsie. And in Poughkeepsie there was Eastman's Business College. It was on the site of Eastman Park where the old YMCA is.
Yes.
And the next aunt went there to Eastman's Business College. Now, I don't know if she went to high school first, or if she went right from 8th grade at St. Mary's up there to Eastman's Business College, but she did. And I know Josephine McKay, who was another old family in the village, they lived on Mizere Avenue. She also went to Eastman's Business College with Nick's Aunt Phil. So the high school life became, once the high school was right here in the village, then there was a lot of high school life. And the biggest thing in the high school was sports. I mean, it was just all of a sudden they had sports teams with their friends.
So you're saying that the new high school is really what we think of as the junior high right now?
No, the high school I'm talking about, right, I'm way back. I'm talking about Central Dutchess Nursing Home.
Oh, the nursing home,
It's
okay.
called something different now.
Yes.
Yeah, it's on Mizere Avenue.
It's Elon.
Yeah, it's Elon.
Yeah.
No, is it really? Yeah. But anyway, once the high school was built, which was when my mother was young, the social life for those people really grew, because then they began to have clubs and they began to have activities and competitions. And in the my mother was a basketball player in the early 30s, and girls basketball was considered quite a big thing. It was bigger than boys basketball. And they were champions, and their arch enemy was Arlington.
Things
And
haven't changed.
Yeah, right. And so up until then, we had the Drake School on the other side of the bridge, which was the public school, elementary school. And I believe there was a school where the post office was here on the corner of East Main and South Avenue. Where this post office is, there was an elementary school there also.
So across the bridge, the Drake School during the 30s and 40s, that was the elementary school.
No, not during 30s and 40s, probably the 20s and 30s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, possibly that, right, yeah. But so that was how, and in the winter time, we had a lot more snow than you have now. And the roads weren't plowed, so we would slam our sleds down in front of our house. We'd go down that hill, we'd go down Remsen Avenue, down that hill, turn the sled, go down Academy Street, all the way down to the bottom, turn the sled, go all the way down to the bleachery on one ride, and then pull the sled all the way home again and start all over again. So
It's really a shame that kids today can't experience things like that. They don't go out.
Right, well, I know, you ride in a neighborhood today, it's all dull and quiet, you know? And every neighborhood, we'd stay out at night till our parents would just about drag us in. We'd build a bonfire, you know, we just had a wonderful time, you know? I still have a lot of
The lake was a big part, wasn't it?
The lake was a big draw, but mostly for the kids on the other side of the bridge, for some reason. Because there's an area of the lake at the bottom of West Street and Brown Avenue called the Cove.
Yes.
And they would swim there in the summer. And then in the winter, they'd go on the ice, and they were all ice skaters. And my husband went on with his Model T Ford, as he told you. And I
remember he saying he got his car and went down there. That was kind of a risky thing to do for a young man, right? To make circles in the ice.
I don't think so. They did crazy things. I never got to skate on the lake because my mother's brother, at age 14, saved 2 people, and 2 other people drowned in the lake through the ice. And he had his Boy Scout training. He knew what to do. And so he saved them. And he got I told you.
He got the award.
Yeah, he got the, oh dear, I can't remember. Carnegie
Award.
Hero Medal he got, which is
that's a very prestigious award.
It is, yeah, he did, yeah. And it was written up in many papers and everything. And it's in a big book that Carnegie's, they have a list of all the people, yeah. He's the same man who was killed in World War II at age 19.
Oh.
Yeah, he's Carmine DiMizio. And that my mother's 2 brothers. I can remember, I'm gonna get to World War II now, okay? No? Okay, keep on with this. All right, so we'll go on with this, when I talked about the high school. So then in 1937, the Board of Education for that high school met. And I've had some old yearbooks from that high school. They called them the Wapparian. And when they went up to the other building, they called it the Portico because of the portico entrance, you know?
Okay.
Yeah, but before that, it was the Wapparian. And that school at that time was the only high school within a radius of like 100 miles or something. And it drew in, the few people that came to high school came from all these little country schools and went in there to high school, but there weren't that many. The only ones who did it, ones who had transportation to get there in the 30s, you know. So in 1937, the Board of Education met and took advantage of President Roosevelt developed the WPA, Work Projects Program Administration. And they took advantage of that and accepted an offer to build a high school, a central school. The central school took in, I think, 11 schools from all little schools. Some went to 7th or 8th grade, some went only to 6th grade. And then all those kids were transported into the central school in 1940. I think the school opened in 1940. I had it written down here someplace, but I remember I went in there in 1st grade. I can tell you that right now, okay. Oh dear, where did I
So
put
which
this?
school did you go into at 1st grade?
I went into that building in 1st grade, which now is the Wappingers Junior High, okay?
Okay.
There were 11 schools brought into that, and all of the old schools, some of them still exist, like the one up at Oak Grove, that school is still there. There was the Fishkill School, which is still there because that was just an addition.
Right, they put additions onto that.
And then there was a Hopewell School. There was a school in New Hamburg. That's up on a hill. Somebody made it into a beautiful home.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, right. And I'm trying to think where else there were schools. Houstonville, I think, might have had one. And Hopewell did, I know. And I think there was one up in East Fishkill, out by Fishkill Plains, there was one. Not right in Hopewell, but in by Fishkill Plains. So all those schools were brought into the central school district. This central school district covers 150 square miles, which is unbelievable. So when the central school district was formed and I went in first grade, it was the first time I ever saw a school bus. There was no such thing. And they were red and blue, the school colors.
Oh, that's interesting.
School buses never got yellow until probably 1948 or 50.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
I don't know if we
I'd
have
have to
any
look that
pictures
up.
of the old school buses.
Oh, they
that
were red and blue. They were
That's
red
great.
and blue. They were beautiful. And we only had maybe 6 or 8 school buses, and now there are hundreds.
Yes.
And the school bus, it was such a thing, because I never rode a school bus because I lived on Remsen Avenue and I walked to school. So if I had a friend who rode a school bus and she invited me to her house, I was just in heaven. I couldn't wait to go because I was going to get to ride the school
bus.
Yeah. And I can remember the drivers. I mean, I wrote them down, but I do remember them all. There was Mr. Dowdy was one. His wife was Mildred Dowdy. She was a 6th grade teacher.
Oh my goodness, I taught with Millie Dowdy.
Did you really?
Yes, that's amazing. I didn't know her husband
really?
was the...
He was one of the first bus drivers. And Chippo Silvestri, who lived up on the West Main Street side in the village. And there's another guy named Mill, and I can't remember. Oh, and Tony Cuccello, who lived who lived down near my grandfather off of South Avenue. And I can remember those bus drivers. But it was so exciting because we had school buses, you know. It was an exciting thing. And we had such a beautiful school. I mean, the terrazzo floors, and it was just such
that
a
was
beautiful
known.
thing. Yeah. It was a wonderful thing to go right in there brand new. It was so nice, you know. And I looked in the yearbook at the teachers from the old high school. I have the last high school yearbook. I looked in it, and those teachers all came over to that school. Plus, they added many more. I don't know how many
From the Allant building?
Yeah, those teachers all
went over
there.
to
I
the
mean,
new school.
Fred Cousins was the basketball coach down there, and he came over to our school, phys ed. And Joe Keegan was a phys ed teacher down there, but he came over, but eventually he became a principal.
He became the superintendent for
of
many
schools.
years.
And even Ben Ingram, who was a principal, he
Yes.
was a teacher in the old high school. And Miss Georgiana Gurney, who I mentioned before, she was a guidance counselor. And Betty Clearwater was, she taught Latin and French, and she came over to the Wappingers School, and I had her. These are people I had as teachers, even though I went in there in 1941. These were my teachers in high school in the 1950s, early 50s. I'm trying to think who else came over.
So what did you do in high school for fun?
What did we do for fun?
Do we want to know?
If you watch the Happy Days TV show, that was what we did for fun. I mean, it was fun. It was the best years of my life. I cannot believe that the kids today have not had a chance to experience it, you know. I mean, every weekend there was something going on. There was, you know, during the winter it was basketball games. And then if it was a home game, they'd have it at our school. And then after the game, we'd all walk down here to the village and we had like 3 choices of soda fountains and 2 or 3 choices of pizza places, and we'd all go out and we'd have a good time, you know. And Julie Miller's ice cream parlor was on West Main Street. And Oliver's Italian restaurant that made pizza was on West Main, but then going down.
So you crossed over the bridge.
We did cross over the bridge for social life. But still, we didn't really meet those kids from the other side of the bridge till 9th grade. Because most of them went to St. Mary's and they came over in 9th grade. And so it was like we had a new crop of friends.
Yeah.
You know, it was nice, really, it was nice. And when they first came, they were so sedate and quiet. Boy, they loosened up. They loosened up by December.
Those Catholic kids that came over.
It was fun. But I did say this before too. They were so much better than us in social studies and English, you know, because they had been drummed up with that, but we were better in science and math, so we all got along though. It was nice. And so the classes grew in size. But my graduating class from Wappingers Central School was only 95 people. It was the smallest graduating class that they'd ever had out of that school. And the reason it was so small is we were born during the Depression in
Oh.
1934, so we were the smallest class. But other classes were a few, those close to us were just a few people bigger, but ours was the smallest class. So with those, from the first grade to the 12th grade, in that building, the same kids, except the few that came in from the country schools around the 8th grade or so. Some of the country schools still were functioning, even though it was a central school district. I had a lot of my dearest friends came from Hopewell Junction, from the Hopewell School. They came over in 7th grade.
Do you remember when they built Ketchum? That was,
Oh,
then
Ketchum.
they changed,
I know when they built Ketchum.
was that in the
I didn't write that
60s?
down. It would have been,
Early 60s maybe?
yeah, it would have been in the early 60s, right?
Yeah.
Ketchum is named, the original Board of Education that made the decision to build the central school, Roy C. Ketchum was on that board, and James Evans was on that board, and Malcolm Hunter, who was the village postmaster, was on that board, and I'm trying to think who else I would remember. But they named that school after Roy C. Ketchum, then they named the Evans and
Evans School.
and then they
James
decided we
Evans.
better stop, because they didn't know,
Right.
how far they could go with that. But
Did you go to Grinnell Library? Did you
Oh,
go
yeah,
up the
oh, yeah.
turret? I mean, we
Oh,
hear
yes,
stories
yes,
of,
yes.
that's how you got up there, right?
yeah, during the week, we'd go there to do our homework.
Well, things haven't changed, I don't
And
think.
poor Miss Drace, Miss Frances Drace, who lived in the apartment at the library with her
Yes.
mother, we just drove her up the wall, that poor lady, I'm telling you, really. We'd all get, on weeknights, that's where we went to the library, and then we might stop for ice cream or something. But, and a lot of girls and fellas would hang out together in the library if they were dating and not letting their parents know that they were up to anything. And they would meet in that dark little turn on that turret.
Yeah, that was really the only way to get up there.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean,
oh, yeah.
so many people, even now in the village, they remember going to the library through the turret.
Even my kids did.
Yeah.
My son's gonna be 65.
And that just was closed
Yeah. I don't
the
know
last
when
10 years. It really
More
became
than
a
that,
safety issue,
Yeah.
maybe 20.
But my kids remember that. I remember when I was real little going to the library, and the children's room was up at the top of the stairs. And where the window seat is,
Yes.
and all the children's books were all spread on that window seat, and that's where we used to, that's when I was really little. I used to go up there to the
Storage, did Miss Drace read stories
Oh,
to
she
you?
did story time, yeah, we had story time, yeah.
And then what was below?
Below there was a department store, Florence Henderson's department store, and there was a printer down in the basement part, and that was the original Wappingers it wasn't Southern Duchess News, it was Wappingers Shopper.
Chronicle.
It was
The
Chronicle first, and then
I
it
think,
became
yeah.
Wappingers Shopper. And then upstairs, I recall Beasley's Insurance Agency, it might have been something else at one time.
Oh, there was something upstairs
No,
other
next
than the library?
No, above the basement section.
Oh,
On the
okay.
other end of the building, where there was a use of the basement, and then the first floor, where the library is now, next to the library, there was a little insurance agency, yeah. And then the little building next to the library was Dr. O'Brien's office. And Dr. O'Brien lived over here on Park Street, but he has his medical office down there. And then as you went down the hill.
Well, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm going to, we're gonna end this now because I wanna hear all about the businesses and
Okay.
East Main Street, and we'll do that in our next session. And hear a little bit more about West Main Street and the parades. I know you just have all of this stuff that you wanna tell us about. So
Okay.
we'll end this now and we'll have another interview.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.